There is an object hidden in the sky. Our predecessors studied its appearances. Like a vast clockwork apparatus, it appeared on a fixed timeline and disappeared whole civilizations. They have left us records of this invisible eye in the sky and how they hid underground from its face. They feared the return of the phoenix.
When Cain killed Abel, as the story goes, Cain lamented and said, hey, you're not going to kill me, but you're doing the same thing by sending me out into the wilderness. Because if you send me out into the wilderness, how do I know that they're not going to kill me? So Cain was given a mark. But this is how the story goes. I don't believe the story. I don't believe the narrative at all. I believe it's descriptive of a situation where civilized people, when they punished other people, they would banish them. Banishment was just like a death sentence, because when the Cro-Magnon would banish for crimes committed or political reasons, whatever, some religious reasons, or sacrifice, when they banished somebody and they sent them out of the city walls, it was over with. There's no survival out there. Cro-Magnon was going to capture them and eat them, and we have found the archaeological proof of this. The others were the Neanderthal that the civilized people of the Cro-Magnon feared.
This is the capture flood. The moon appears in our orbit, arriving from the destroyed Nemesis system. Here is the third object to appear in our system. It is exactly on the 600-year Anunnaki timeline. This is followed by the event of 3895 BC on the 138-year Phoenix periodicity timeline. 3895 BC, lithospheric displacement. There is a 30-degree pole shift. It causes a new heavens and a new earth. The destruction on earth is so total, it is considered as a new creation. That's how it's exactly conveyed in the Bible in the book of Genesis.
In the beginning, according to Aztec mythology, the creator couple gave birth to 4 sons. They were of the east, north, south, and west. After a 600-year period, these sons began to create the universe, including the creation of cosmic time, called the suns. These gods eventually created the world and all other deities. Note, this is very reminiscent of the Anunnaki who were created, and their calendar, the Anunnaki Ner system, was based off 600-year epics. Now, in the Aztec mythology, for 600 years, these deities lived in complete idleness. Then the 4 brethren assembled, created the first fire, which is the hearth of the universe, called the sun. And afterward, they created a half-sun. They formed the first man and woman, commanding that the former should till the ground and the latter will spin and weave, while to the woman they gave powers of divination and the grains of maize that she might work cures. They also divided time into days and inaugurated a year of 18 20-day periods, or 360 days. This is reminiscent of all my research in the past, where I show that all the oldest calendrical systems were only 360 days a year.
Cave paintings on walls with sympathetic magic. Sympathetic magic is a physical act, or what seems to be physical to us, in this holospheric environment. And then we act on it in faith, and the holosphere brings into contact the conditions which we desire. In ancient times, the Great Pyramid was built on this principle, a 41-story high computer code designed to introduce an interference pattern into a holospheric coding that was basically a prison environment.
Also, in his book, The Book of the Damned, he wrote, "I begin with the notion of some other world from which objects and substances have fallen to this earth. Every living thing upon this earth may ancestrally have come from somewhere else." This is amazing for conclusions that were made just from reading scientific reports over a century ago. The secret to the allure of Christianity lies in the antiquity of its elements. The Roman religious authorities attempted to bring together all people under its influence and power, choosing many symbols to perfect its purpose. The literal meaning of symbolic is to bring things together. Through the act of gathering, a religion is formed. The word religion meaning to bind. There's no way, unless coding was changed, that groups of people would automatically overnight begin speaking languages that their neighbors can't comprehend. All the ancient texts assert that there was only one tongue and one speech in the old time. And this event, the building of a structure to the heavens to challenge the gods, is the reason why we have all these different languages and dialects. It's very interesting. Only in a holosphere could this have happened.
In my own book, When the Sun Darkens, and in Chronicon, I show that the terminal date for the basement of the Great Pyramid ends in 1902, and this is by many different mathematical computations. What's fascinating is that 1902 to the year 2106, which is the 6,000th year from the beginning of the pole shift of 3895 BC, which was started by Phoenix, is exactly 6,000 years. But from 1902 to 2106 is 204 years, which, if Edgar Casey is correct, 203 levels of the Great Pyramid plus the chief cornerstone is 204. Put another way, 1902 was the beginning of the Giza course countdown to the arrival and finishing of the monument.
But that's what they want you to believe, because they don't want you to understand the alternative. So the alternative is what Charles Fort has documented so many times. That something, not a member of our ordinary solar system and not the moon, passes over the surface of the sun and darkens the entire world for a 2 to 3 hour period. Whatever that something is, it's gigantic. In the book of the Secrets of Enoch, we read this passage. He wrote all these signs of the creation which the Lord created, and wrote 366 books, and handed them over to his sons, and remained on earth 30 days, and was again taken up into heaven on the 6th day of the month Siphon, on the very day and hour when he was born. The stars will disappear from the heavens. The Fenris wolf advances with its mouth gaping. Its upper jaw reaches the heavens, and the lower one drops to the earth. Flames shoot out of his eyes and nostrils, and the sea will surge on land. The storm ascends to the heavens itself and flows over the earth when the sky is split. In this Viking Elder Edda, the Ragnarok period of the end days is characterized by an increase of evil and violence, brother slaying brother, and battles all over the world. In this year, Skull will swallow the sun, and the moon will be devoured. The heavens and the air become sprayed with blood as unburied corpses litter the ground. Thus begins the Fimble winter. We have shown in many of our notes and posts and videos that the constellation Pisces was long ago associated to the appearance of Typhon, or the Phoenix, where is located another variable star called Tixpicium. Variable stars are very active during disasters, when stars are evil. I have shown in videos and notes that variable stars are not real luminaries, but very local objects that coordinate attacks against our world, projecting phenomena like Phoenix disasters to induce resets, volcanic activity, quakes, and even affect human populations. My video, Dark Realities, mentions this artificial stellosphere, the role of the variable stars, which seem to operate in concert to create phenomena on Earth.
No one knows what happened to those children. And in the year 1212, we have mass human vanishings, and we have quakes in the Middle East. But the human vanishings in the year 1212 are connected to a very intriguing story called the Children's Crusade. 2 kids started going through Europe preaching that since the adults can't defeat the Muslims and free Jerusalem from the heathens, then it must be the children of God who are supposed to do it. The movement gained ground, and within months, hundreds of thousands of children throughout Europe marched toward Jerusalem. No one knows what happened to those children. The historians of the day have left us many records about the children passing through their townships and towns and whole long trains, armies of kids moving toward the south and Jerusalem. There are no historians from that period that tell us what happened to those children. We do have many historians trying to tell us what they think happened to those children, only in retrospect, long after. We don't know what happened to them. Nor is there any records whatsoever in any of the Muslim caliphates, and they were very extensive record keepers. Nothing about the arrival of all these children, armies of children, in the Muslim lands. They never made it. We don't know what happened to those people. We don't know what wired all these kids up to do to march like that. It's a mystery.
He was an Israelite, not a Jewish prophet, and he wrote a lot on the future apocalypse, writing that the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light, and the sun shall be darkened in his goings forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. I will shake the heavens, and the earth shall be removed from her place. Isaiah also wrote, the Lord maketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. The prophet Ezekiel provides us even more detail in confirmation of this thesis. He wrote that God said, I will cover the heaven and make the stars thereof dark. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon shall not give her light. And all the bright stars over heaven shall I make dark over you. This is no ordinary cloud, but as we have been shown in the 1902 material and 1687 material, these are vast mud flood type reddish rains that basically blot out everything in the sky. In the old Viking stories, all prophecies declared that Fenris was fated to be their destruction. We are not surprised to find that the Norse Ragnarok comes from two Old Norse words, Ragna and Rakar, meaning the day of darkness. In the Ragnarok traditions, the Fenris wolf howls and much destruction is wrought upon the earth. This is an indication of a noise coming from the sky, such as we have documented over many times concerning the Phoenix phenomenon. And the oceans rising up out of their basins, the sun darkening, great destruction and cataclysm, and a horn-like noise from the sky seems to be a common denominator with Mother Shipton of Yorkshire as well. Stonehenge is a chronolithic calendar. Imagine a scenario where an ancient monument that is designed to geometrically in 3 dimensions record events, chronomarkers in time, isolates a year like 1902. And in that year, 5,000 and something years after its construction, a scientist shows up and studies the very site that predicts the year. And many other years, every single year the Phoenix phenomenon occurred in the months of May on a 138-year timeline going back 5,500 and something years. So imagine this scenario where this scientist does these studies, and in the year 1902, with his limited apparatus and abilities, still targets the year that Stonehenge was destroyed 3,700 years ago. It's amazing.
We have a lot of problems with the way Jews have conveyed history. Now, a lot of people they buy into the Christian interpretation, which is propagated through Jewish, basically, reinterpretation of ancient records. And Genesis is very specific. It says that the sons of God came unto the daughters of men and took all that they wanted, and they begat sons, and these became mighty men of renown. I forgot. It's Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. I can't remember the exact wording, but there's no reference anywhere in there that these were how hybrids and demons and nefarious creatures were created. No, it doesn't say that anywhere in there. It says that the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they begat sons. Now, when you read Jewish writings, it goes into a lot of detail about how evil and iniquitous and how it does, but that's not what the historical record shows. We have a lot of problems with the way Jews have conveyed history. We have a lot of problems with that in the Archaix research. We're always going through showing where these things were either made up, they're absolute invention, like the Moses epic.
Now, this leads off into many theories on vibratory mechanics. There are some pretty good books. This video is not about the levitation of ancient monuments and all that. I don't care about all that. It's how they did it doesn't mean anything to me, because I know the world they lived in was fundamentally different than the worlds that we have today. They were living in a simulated holography just like we were, but the protocols that we call physics constants today in no way coalesce with those that were in operation at the time, and we'll get to that later. The physics constants we have today, widely known: 1.618, the phi, the golden mean, pi 3.14. Those are universals, and they transcend all the simulations. However, we don't have a vapor canopy anymore. We don't have 80% more enriched oxygen in our atmosphere. We don't have this massive layer of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere anymore. Our world is way different than it was in their time. And this allowed them to do things that we cannot do today. We cannot replicate today. This family is pure evil, and a mechanism was set in place thousands of years ago to break their power whenever they have succeeded in total control. This same family, through corruption, caused ancient Sumer, Harappa, Magan, Mitanni, the Hittites, Egypt, Macedonia, the Olmecan states, the Han dynasty of China, and many other dynasties, the independent republics of the Maya, which much misinformation has been put out about those people. The Romans and so many other civilizations, they caused them to fall to corruption and totalitarianism, which then activated the weapon put in place as a governor to keep this one wicked world-ruling family in check. Don't think that they don't know it. Book of the Gleanings 4:26. The pillars of heaven were broken and fell down to earth. The sky vault was rent and broken. The whole of creation was in chaos. The stars in the heavens were loosened from their places, so they dashed about in confusion. There was a revolt on high. A new ruler appeared there and swept across the sky in majesty. The destroyer passed away into the fastness of heaven, and the great flood remained 7 days, diminishing day by day as the waters drained away to their places. Then the waters spread out calmly, and the great ship drifted amid a brown scum and debris of all kinds. Authenticity is lent to this account because it references anciently well-documented flood details, but does not cite any known texts, showing this is an original composition. It's the very earliest records that held that the Anunnaki came from the deep, and they weren't even called Anunnaki. That's the later Babylonians doing that. They were called the Anuna. The exact history of the Anuna is playing out today. The technologically advanced rulers and their families of various governments they're preparing underworld cities and manufacturing districts, whole subterranean oil refineries and food, weapons depots. This is all being done in preparation for the next big cataclysm. And they know when it is.
He says, the plague fell over ships in the midst of the sea, whose sailors were suddenly attacked by God's wrath, and the ship became a tomb for their captains, and they continued adrift on the waves, carrying the corpses of their owners. This is evidence that the Great Black Death Plague, which came in 1346 and 1347, which came from the sky, according to the historians of the time, not rats on ships from China, is the same thing that happened in the Justinian plague. It came from the sky. Over 61 underground facilities have been found in ancient Turkey. The first one was discovered in 1962. Petra is another one that was later rediscovered after the cataclysm, after people had abandoned it, and even the Romans had added their own dressing and architecture to it. But these underground facilities like Phoenix Hill in China and so many others have been found. They're fallout shelters. They're very sophisticated. People had bored through solid rock to create these underground facilities to survive. There was something on the surface they feared, and it wouldn't have been a flood, because a flood would have drowned those people out. It was something else. Something for which the historical record is silent. The reason the historical record is silent
is because the advent of writing is nowhere near as ancient as we are told.
Now, in the book of Creation 3:2, we read, "At the time of the great destruction of earth, God caused a dragon from out of the heaven to come and encompass her about. The dragon was frightful to behold. It lashed its tail. It breathed hot fire and coals, and a great catastrophe was inflicted upon mankind. The body of the dragon was wreathed in a cold, bright light, and beneath, on the belly, was a ruddy-hued glow, while behind it trailed a flowing tail of smoke. It spewed out cinders and hot stones, and its breath was foul and stenchful, poisoning the nostrils of men. Its passage caused great thunderings and lightnings to rend the thick darkened sky, all heaven and earth being made hot. The seas were loosened from their cradles and rose up, pouring across the land. There was an awful shrilling trumpeting from the sky, which outpoured even the howling of the unleashed winds." Now, my own note here is Phoenix identified in the oldest records as a sky dragon. As soon as the story starts, the sun darkens and the Canaanite city of Joppa is flooded. The background timing for this legend is 1687 BC. Perseus was not a Greek, but acknowledged to be a foreigner. Some say from Assyria, a land of the Near East where thousands of representations of Phoenix have been found. They have been discovered on monuments and on prisms and stelae as a winged disc. The Assyrian god Nerta rides this winged disc, which was the symbol for the phoenix. Now, in the Psalms of the Old Testament, this imagery is also found with God riding on the back of a winged cherub beast. In the Greek story of Perseus, whose name means destroyer, the hero rides astride a winged horse. Other Greek stories associate horses to the sun chariot. Now, Medusa has always been linked to the stars. The eye of Medusa is called Algol, the ghoul, an undead creature, also known as the blinking demon in the Perseus constellation. It marked a region of the night sky feared by Bronze Age humanity. Algol is a variable star called Beta Persei, the demon star, in many cultures. In the story of Medusa, she turned men into stone, which was an old metaphor for perish by disaster. Long ago, fossils of animals and even people were found, and they were interpreted for what they were, the petrified remains of those that had died in a cataclysm. In fact, the word disaster is derived from two older roots meaning evil star. The word catastrophe means falling stars, and the word hysteria means people going crazy during a disaster, which is also derived from star. Perseus decapitates the Medusa and uses her magical eyes of petrification to kill the Kraken, which was merely a monstrous personification of the unstable sea that flooded cities when Phoenix darkened the sun in 1687 BC. We have shown it in citations from ancient texts that the Phoenix was often referred to as the destroyer, which is what Perseus means.
These changes were only caused by celestial events that wrought destruction on Earth. 414 years later, in 721 BC, the Chinese report a change in the heavens and inability to predict the darkening of the sun. Plutarch and Ovid wrote that at the end of Romulus's reign over Rome, the sun was darkened. Darkening of the whole world was confirmed at that time by Latin writers. These changes were only caused by celestial events that wrought destruction on Earth. Babylonian record has the sun turned black. In this year, the 10 tribes of Israel, who had long been overlords over Judah, were carried away into Assyrian captivity. In the historical narrative, from this point on, it becomes more and more clear that none of these civilization Phoenix reset disasters have anything to do with the moon. Academia pushes the eclipse interpretation despite the actual ancient writers' explanations that the moon was not involved. In this year, for unknown reasons, Japan initiates a new calendar in Nihon Shoki. The sun darkening event stopped the Medo-Lydian War, resulting in a peace accord negotiated by Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon.
Sir Flinders Petrie, 100 years ago, found abundant evidence of a drilling and boring technology employed in the structure that was beyond his ability to understand, but he documented it nonetheless. But a century later, Christopher Dunn recognized that these builders used ultrasonic drilling with diamond-tipped bits. Petrie's measurements are published in his book, The Pyramids and Temples of Giza. His measurements are accepted by Egyptologists and especially by Zawi Hawass, the head of Egypt's Antiquities Department. Hawass calls Petrie the father of Egyptology.
These divisions in time
also correspond very good with the phoenix cycles of antiquity. At the end of each phoenix cycle, the sun died and was seen to be reborn when the sun darkened. Of additional interest, in the ancient Greek four ages, the gold and silver, bronze and iron, race is the more accurate translation, but golden age has become so established in English that both terms should be mentioned. These races or ages are separate creations of the gods. This idea of ages involving the introduction of new races that ended in catastrophes is mirrored also in the Mayan Popol Vuh and the great Yuga ages of ancient Indian tradition. The Krita, the Treta, the Vapara, and the Kali Yuga ages. These all seem to follow after the Sumerian concept of the Anunnaki building different worker species until they produced modern humans.
Today it is popular to believe that the deeper a fossil is found in the geologic column, the older it is, being also less complex than those organisms found like in stratigraphic levels above them. To make matters worse, this scale is propagated in terms of millions of years, based on the supposition that each layer took hundreds of thousands, even millions of years to develop and petrify the deceased organisms within. Uniformitarianism.
Amazingly, this was the year 864 Annus Mundi, or 864 years after the 3895 BC pole shift caused by Phoenix, that was so absolute in its destruction that the ancients declared that it was the beginning of a new heavens and a new earth, and counted it as year one of the pre-flood world. It's a phenomenal number. This 3103 BC begin date for the Kali Yuga began a 792-year countdown to the flood in 2239 BC when Phoenix collapsed the vapor canopy. Now 792 years is the periodicity of the Nemesis X object many of you call Nibiru, which returns in 2046 when the 13th Bactrian of the Mayan long count is completed.
And this is where the Olmec calendar came from. This is where the Vedic calendar came from. This is where the Mayan calendar came from. This is where the Sumerian calendar came from. This is why every single one of them are divisible by 360, because they counted days. This is why they were all measurable in cycles and epicycles. These are vapor canopy calendars that counted down to the next major cataclysm that was going to occur during a vapor canopy.
But the reason all these ancient cultures appeared after 3439 BC is because Jonathan Gray is correct. All of these artifacts that he and others have found all around the world, these magnetic discs and just strange objects that show technological precision, is because that world was fractured, and the Jewish Haggadah text only says this about that period, that there was a terrible sun darkening and there were terrible earthquakes, and 1/3 of the world's population died in that hour. And it's called the flood of Gihon. The Gihon River is the Nile River in Egypt.
Our whole world moved from its place. Now, for a little clarity, for those of you who are not aware of the sixth seal judgment as mentioned in the book of Revelations, which was copied from the older Sibylline oracles, which the church later destroyed to cover up their tracks as the subject matter for their apocalypse record, this is what it reads. It reads, "And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell into the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs, when she is shaken of a mighty wind." The sixth seal judgment prophecy involves very specific descriptions of a pole shift. Lithospheric displacement. Our whole world moved from its place. When the outer lithosphere smoothly glides over the mantle and displaces entire continents, causing oceans to invade coastal lands, extreme seismic disturbances, and volcanism. And this has happened multiple times on the 138-year timeline, as shown in part 1, the Archaix prophecy.
further demonstrating that the years were tampered with by the church record keepers. In the year 538, according to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, copied over by church scribes, a strange eclipse of the sun occurred, and the stars were seen in daytime. But historians have discredited this because computer simulations show that no eclipses occurred at that time over England. So, we have here an ancient chronicle that describes an event that happened but could not have happened in the year alleged, 538.
What we have in Cro-Magnon are a highly sophisticated, intelligent people that kept only the one thing that they couldn't lose, and that was their aesthetic values. And we see them in the paintings. We see anatomically correct bison, kine, ibex, ancient horses, pigs. Their paintings were on par with anybody's ability to paint today. It's the only thing they had left. They had lost everything.
I cannot misquote Charles Fort, so I'm going to do something I have never done in any of my 93 videos, and I am going to read from a script on camera. That's how important I feel this quote is. This is Charles Fort. This is in 1931. I now have a theory that once upon a time we were real and alive, but departed into this state that we call existence, that we have carried over with us from the real existence from which we died. The ideas of truth and of axioms and principles and generalizations, ideas that really meant something when we were really alive. But that, of course, now, in our phantom existence, which is demonstrable by any X-ray photograph of any of us, can have only phantom meaning. So then, our never-ending but always frustrated search for our lost reality. We come upon chimera and mystification, but persistently have beliefs as retentions from an experience in which there were things that we once believed in. This is the closest approximation that somebody could have made in 1931 before computers to the idea that we were existing in a simulation and that we are avatars. For 7 days and 7 nights, man will watch this awesome sight. The tides will rise beyond their ken to bite away the shores, and then the mountains will begin to roar. The earthquakes split the plain to shore, and flooding waters rushing in will flood the lands with such a din that mankind cowers in muddy fen and snarls about his fellow men. He bares his teeth and fights and kills and secretes food in secret hills. And ugly in his fear he lies to kill marauders, thieves, and spies. Man flees in terror from the floods and kills and rapes and lies in blood. And spilling blood by mankind's hands will stain and bitter many lands. And when the dragon's tail is gone, man forgets and smiles and carries on. To apply himself too late, for mankind has earned deserved fate. His masked smile, his false grandeur will serve to the gods their anger stir, and they will send the dragon back to light the sky. His tail will crack upon the earth and rend the earth, and man shall flee lord, king, and serf. But slowly they are routed out to seek diminishing water spout, and men will die of thirst before the ocean dries to mount the shore, and lands will crack and rend anew. You think it strange, it will come true. And in some far-off distant land, some men of such a tiny band will have to leave their solid mount and span the earth, those few to count. Who survives this and then begin the human race again, but not on land already there, but on ocean beds, stark, dry, and bare. Not every soul on earth will die as the dragon's tail goes sweeping by. Not every land on earth will sink, but those will wallow in stench and stink. On rotting bodies of beasts and men, of vegetation crisped on land. But the land that rises from the sea will be dry and clean and soft and free of mankind's dirt, and therefore be the source of man's new dynasty. And those that live will ever fear the dragon's tail for many years. But time erases memory. You think it's strange, but it will be.
Now, the veracity of its provenance may have issues, for books pass through many hands throughout history. However, the value of a text is measured by its content. Does it offer evidence of its claims intextually, cross-reference the historical known places and events, and does it possess very specific data that other texts also relate? The Colburn Bible meets all three standards.
We are left with the reappearance of these godlike bearded people who, after this disaster, resurfaced in two ways: from under a mountain and in fleets of ships from across the sea. Because the Anunnaki were called the children of Anu, the later Babylonians misinterpreted the originals in very old records of the Sumerians concerning when they were called by the logogram Anunnaki.
Until the vapor canopy is acknowledged, no theory of ancient history makes sense. The calendars, the traditions, the narratives, the monuments, and even the mechanics of the Great Flood cannot be put into appropriate context until a recognition of the vapor canopy is known and understood. Andrew Collins, Graham Hancock, Robert Bauval, Robert Schock, Michael Tillinger, Brian Forrester, David Hatcher Childress, Zechariah Sitchin, and his many copycats like Brian Carlson. They don't know this history, so they interpret the ancient texts, traditions, and monuments by modern frames of reference. The result is libraries packed with absolute bullshit.
So we have Egypt as the land of refuge. Egypt was not only the land of refuge in ancient times to people who wanted to survive the cataclysm, but this refuge was even extended in the spiritual world. The kingdom of Seeker of the dead in ancient Egypt, the gate of Rostal was the great pyramid and the labyrinth that was underneath it. You gain access to it through a corridor that you went under the Sphinx to gain. Rostal and the resurrection was a very real belief system of the ancient Egyptians.
She said 100 years after a Second World War, a great sky dragon will visit ruin on the world. Oceans will slip their basins. Same thing Nostradamus said. Same thing we find in the sixth seal of the Apocalypse in the book of Revelation, the Phoenix seal.
About 18 centuries later, the psalmist wrote, "Therefore we will not fear, though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea." To declare such a faith implies that in some remote epoch of human experience, the earth had indeed undergone some major changes. That the biblical evidence for the Phoenix phenomenon cannot be easily disregarded can be seen in the obscurely dated biblical book of Job. Scholars are at variance over the antiquity of this text because it is very old, but most agree that it is the oldest book of the Bible.
I have many videos showing you how to accurately calculate all the Sumerian datings, and how the Egyptians and how the Babylonians, Akkadians, the Harappans, Mohenjo-Daro, Larak, ancient Magan culture, and all the way up to the Middle Kingdom Egypt, they had a really bad problem when their dating systems were copied by others, by outsiders. A zero was crept in all the time. It happened with Plato too. So, and I've shown in all my videos how you just remove the zero and you have the actual amount of years.
This is curious, for any ancient Egyptian ceremony concerning a flood concerns a 1656 month period, and 1656 months is exactly 138 years. Over 900 years ago, the Talmudic researcher Rashi, around 1090 CE, wrote that the Great Flood occurred in the 1656 year, and that 1656 years was a definite period of time that occurred between cataclysms. The Egyptians were very good at concealing information. This is why they dated things in days. It was really easy to know that a certain amount, that 138 years was 1656 months. So they used a lunar system where they dated things in the lunar mode, or sometimes they used a stellar system of 360 days. So the Egyptians would throw out, as visitors, when the Greeks visited them, they would throw out a number. Oh, well, our history goes back 23,742 years. But it wasn't years. You divide it by 12 because they use a lunar-based system. And when you divide it by 12, it fits perfectly into the historical narrative.
The first English Bibles are published, and Christians everywhere banished Jews from hundreds of European cities because of their financial malpractices. Joan d'Arc is burned at the stake as the Roman Catholic Church rises to its full power. Just as the start of the Kali Yuga in 3103 BC began a 792-year countdown to the Phoenix destruction of the Great Flood, so too does 1314 AD begin a 792-year countdown to 2046, when time will collapse according to the Mayan long count, and the return of Nemesis X object in that same year, which in the book of Revelation is called Wormwood, which will change the 24-hour day to 16 hours and 365-day year to 240 days. This will happen when the vapor canopy returns, and this quickening of time-space will also quicken human biology to miraculous speed.
In fact, I have so many source materials that I openly challenge anyone who wants to debate this topic, and go look at my source materials, because I did not date a single one of these episodes. I just recorded the dates and found out with a simple calculator that they're all 138 years apart, and that the next one is in 2040 AD in the month of May. Any naysayers out there want to challenge me? We have EOTT. We have other podcasts that are willing to broadcast this. I am up for the challenge because I got a whole arsenal of information, and I'm very willing to embarrass you.
In just 2 or 3 years of time after the appearance of the vapor canopy in 3895 BC, because the Phoenix episode Cataclysm that caused the new heavens and new earth, this vapor canopy altered everything. Now humans had great things to fear. They could live above ground, but they had to live in cities where they had to move by rampways that were roof to roof. And the buildings that they lived on formed the walls of the settlements themselves. This is what we find at Cataluyuk. At Cataluyuk, we find engineers that were trying to keep humans from ever touching the ground. The only time they needed to touch the ground is when they were safely within the confines of the city walls. And the city walls themselves were a part of the structures that they lived in.
It should now be mentioned that these sun darkenings and sky blackening episodes have nothing to do with eclipses involving the moon. Many ancient records reveal that the moon had nothing to do with these cataclysms. 1135 BC cataclysm in China is the mandate of heaven changing, and the Shang dynasty collapses. 250,000 Chinese escaping war escape in ships to reappear as the Olmeca in Central America. Scholars have long noted the associations between the ancient Bronze Age Chinese and the Central American Olmecs of the 10th, 11th, and 9th centuries BC. In 1135 BC, Pharaoh Seknakti of Egypt's reign ends as he reports a circling star that spit fire at the very end of his reign. The next ruler is Ramesses III, who records a terrible tsunami and destruction. Historians estimate that 3.8 million people died in this year from catastrophe as the kingship changed in Egypt. At the very end of his reign, Seknakti reported that an immense black cloud covered the sky. The sun turned blood red and disappeared. Red dust blanketed the land. Also in 1135, Nebuchadnezzar I of Babylon recorded that an object like a comet darkened the sun. In the month of May, the Tuatha Danann invaded Ireland in the Battle of Moytura, shocking the Firbolgs by making the sun darken. And in the Far East, the Chinese report an attack on the sun.
This discovery of the 138 in the pyramid is way after, years after my first book, When the Sun Darkens, on this topic. I had no idea what kind of research I was getting into when I was studying over 40 different versions of the Great Flood and where it was going to take me, and how this ancient Jewish legend of the angel of death who appears every 138 years and destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. This 138 years I found in the Egyptian text This 1,656 month timeline the Egyptians venerated, connecting it to a world cataclysm, then I find that 138 years is exactly 1,656 months. If 1,656 years was how long the pre-flood world lasted, from the Genesis story to the Great Flood itself.
As I have told you guys in my Nunophiles videos and some other ancillary videos as well, the old world has never been the Near East, the Middle East, North Africa, India. That is not the old world. I have told you many times, the old world was in ancient America.
These 204 books, again, books are merely containers of knowledge. And how the number 204 relates to the Great Pyramid has been seen, but now we're going to show it to you in the calendar. In this picture, you're looking at the Book of Life. Each stone is a soul of man. This Book of Life is sitting upon a foundation which provides year one to the return of the chief cornerstone, the apex that will sit upon the monument of man.
But then there is the real nail in the coffin. I have produced at least 30 different historic sources showing that all the calendrical systems in the ancient world were based off of a 360-day calendar. And I'm not the first to publish this. Emmanuel Velikovsky and others before him did so too.
Those of you who have been following my research since 2003 and 2006 when my first books were published, you know that my book in 2011, Anunnaki Homeworld, which is absolutely packed with hundreds of source materials, cried out to the world that 2012 was a hoax, that the 1,872,000 days, the unals of the 13 Bactans, 144,000 unals apiece, could never, mathematically ever, from 3113 BC, end in 2012. They don't. They end in 2046, and even that is questionable. It could end in 2040. Anybody who wants to see Anunnaki Homeworld, you'll see all the chapters and all the facts about the Mayan long count not being able to end in 2012.
Over the years, I found the disastrous episodes afflicted our world, and these visitations were patterned in 138-year periods and in multiples of 138. I found that monuments from the old world recorded this 138-year patterning, that ancient traditions claim that the angel of death appeared every 138 years.
Mario, reading curiously, does not continue the passage, for the very next quatrain continues the description of what will occur in 2040. We now review this connected passage in Archaix Chetham's The Final Prophecies of Nostradamus, Century 2, Quatrain 41. It reads, "The great star will burn for 7 days, and the cloud will make the sun appear double. The large mastiff will howl all night when the great pontiff changes his abode." In 2239 BC, the inhabitants of the earth witnessed the phoenix for 7 days before the cataclysm known popularly as the Great Flood, darkening the sun. The cloud reference here hints to cosmic dust, for the reference to cloud is in the singular. Plurality would have denoted mere atmospheric clouds common every day. The pole shift in global cataclysm and current events at that time are found in chronological order in quatrains numbered 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, and 88. They are spread throughout the predictions of the prophet, but we can easily see the pattern numerically and link them to 2040 AD disaster by their content, which is exactly what Nostradamus wanted the interpreter to do. In When the Sun Darkens, we find not only New York destroyed in 2040, but the North American continent is shoved southward, away from the northern hemisphere, to occupy regions once known as Mexico and Central America, which are also shoved southward to become the new South America, but are heavily destroyed as they pass over the equatorial bulge. South America becomes the new Antarctica, while the reverse occurs in the Far East and everything is pushed northwards. In the place of Canada and the United States are the fragmented and broken lands of ice and rock, formerly of the Arctic.
The Kali Yuga calendar is the most mysterious of the three, for it contains within its structure a hidden calendrical system modeled after the destructive phoenix phenomenon that I have released 30 videos on. In many presentations, I show how the calendars of the old world were all countdowns of days, observing not the sun, but the turnings of the stellosphere. All calendar observations were performed at night in the darkness beneath the thrones, or what the ancients called stars. This was during a world of populations that were organized into matriarchal communities beneath the vapor canopy.
Another member of the Royal Society, Sir Isaac Newton, is famous for his scientific mind, but his other pursuits are not that well known. He found missing gaps in history, falsified chronology, and famous historical events assigned to the wrong years. His Chronology of Ancient Nations book is a masterpiece, a book that I have read personally. He studied prophecy and applied mathematics to his predictions. Sir Isaac Newton was not aware of the Phoenix chronology, but he was a searcher of truth. He knew something was unique about Stonehenge that others had missed. In 1901, he concluded his study of the site and concluded that Stonehenge was dated to about 1680 BC. In the following year of 1902, his conclusions were circulated to other scientific minds in his work Stonehenge and Other British Stone Monuments. 1902 was the last time the Phoenix phenomenon occurred, as shown in the Archaix prophecy and several posts and the book When the Sun Darkens. Isaac Newton's research on Stonehenge would have been entirely a coincidence had it not been for his precise dating of Stonehenge to circa 1680 BC. Because 1687 BC was the second worst worldwide Phoenix cataclysm of world history, the Ogygian flood, and total collapse of the Heliolithic maritime empire from Easter Island and Peru to all of the Mediterranean, all the way to the Indus Valley. In 1903, Jesuit priest Emmanuel Magri began excavating the many thousands of human skeletons from the hypogeum, some with bizarre elongated skulls. He found pottery, other small objects, and diluvian sediment deposits. After the excavation, Father Magri was sent by the Vatican to Tunisia, where he mysteriously died. His drawings, excavation notes, and observations of the hypogeum on Malta, the ruins, were all vanished. The ruins of Malta are the subject of our other videos on the Phoenix destructions that occurred in 2239 BC.
Remember, the Israelites in the Old Testament worshipped the golden calf. This was goddess worship. However, these patriarchal peoples, when they had left Egypt, they had adopted the older patriarchal systems of the Amorites whom they were descended from. Remember, there is an obscure reference in the Old Testament. It's only mentioned one time, but it is thoroughly ignored by many people. And that obscure statement, anybody can use Strong's Concordance and anybody can Google this, but that obscure statement refers to the ancient Israelites being descended from the Amorites. Man, this really troubles a lot of people, man, because they have bought into the Jewish redactionism about how evil the Amorites were. The Jews couldn't stand the ancient Israelites, who were Amorites. The Great Pyramid of Giza. The blocks of this monument in Egypt are made of geopolymers, made through a process in which artificial stone is created that is virtually indistinguishable from natural rock. The limestone casing blocks of the Giza structure contain opal, CT hydroxyapatite, a silico-aluminate not found in the quarries, blocks containing numerous trapped air bubbles. Organic fibers have accidentally fallen into the mixture, and they had been found inside the stone blocks of the Great Pyramid. The earliest traditions of the Great Pyramid of Giza are not Egyptian and assert that it was designed to endure through a cataclysm. That it provided a basis of knowledge for future generation was its purpose. Internal measurements scientifically conducted by Sir Flinders Petrie of the rectilinear subterranean passage widths, chamber heights, passage length, and ascendant passages easily provides a uniform unit of measurement that was used by the constructors throughout the monument. These measurements were discovered over a century ago and were conducted to disprove the wildly popular pyramid inch theories of the time. These measurements are scientifically acceptable today, absolutely precise, and they are arranged in rectilinear lengths of 138, 552, 1518, 1656, 2070, 30, 36, 41, 40, and 57, 96. Every single number divisible by 138. The orbital period of the Phoenix object. Petrie knew nothing of the Phoenix. These numbers as orbital links are proven in my books, When the Sun Darkens and in Nostradamus and the Planets of Apocalypse. We must conclude that the builders of the Great Pyramid of Giza were aware of the Phoenix object, and this awareness allowed them to know when it would return over and over again. We also conclude that the world of the Sethites, of Enoch, and later Abraham was not the primitive society that we have been led to believe. The Great Flood of 2239 BC did not catch them unaware. They prepared for it.
All the calendars of the old world were date count systems, not year count systems. In the Orland manuscript, we read how the bad time came. This is dated in the manuscript as 2193 BC, or 46 years from the actual flood date of 2239 BC, established by over 40 different ancient sources, which we reveal throughout many of our videos.
What really can't be ignored in history is that right after this cataclysm, these fleets show up of Anuna. They're building a whole new infrastructure. They're creating the Sumerian civilization, and the Sumerians started with the sexagesimal system. They started with a really advanced cosmology. Their mathematics was precise. And at the same time in history, almost all at the same time, the Maya Isha Temple of the Cross calendar begins. The Mayan long count calendar begins. The Egyptian long chronology begins. We have the Brahmic Kali Yuga calendar begins 3103 BC. The Sumerian Etana epos is dated 3100 BC. The Scorpion King dated is 3100 BC. The Narmer palette of ancient Egypt is 3100 BC. But all these calendars begin at the same time. It is very unusual that we have this dating system: Sumerian, Vedic, Quiche, Zapotec, the Olmec, the Maya. They all used even the ancient Dutch, the Finnish. They all used the day in their system of counting. They all appeared at the exact same time.
He knew that the oldest calendars of the world did not recognize the year. They were on day count systems. The evening to the morning was a day. Even the book of Genesis in the creation account does not factor in years. They don't care. The writers and the scribes were copying from older Babylonian records where it was admitted that time began, the concept of time began not annually, but annularly. It was a day. It was diurnal, meaning the night began the day. The world turned, which was an illusion. It's all a part of our holography. From Israel, present Israel today, in the Golan Heights, all the way to Nubia, south of Giza, these are going to be the safest places on the planet. They will be the center of all motion. And if anyone knows what a disc looks like when it's spinning, the less centrifugal force is always experienced at the dead center, at the axis. This is why the Great Pyramid in Egypt was always referred to in the oldest text before the word pyramid ever existed as the pillar of heaven. It was the pillar because it was believed to be firmly rooted on the ground. It was a gate over the underworld, and it was a pillar into the sky that held the sky up. It was the axis mundi. It was the Irminsul. It was the tree of life, the tree of knowledge. All these symbols are of the Great Pyramid of Egypt. It was the pillar uncut by human hands that would support the chief cornerstone who is to return in the last days.
These ancient Americans, the Anuna, they had vehicles. They had technological sophistication for hypersonic boring, for levitation of large stones, rocks, especially if they're of a crystalline structure. They drove vehicles that left tracks that have still been seen today. It's we're talking about we're not talking about aliens and, an alien civilization that came to Earth and did all these things. We're talking about humans that were here, that were technologically advanced.
Also, the Babylonian tablets, the Enema Elish, translated into English from the Akkadian, read that in the beginning, the whole world was covered in blood of the slain dragon Tiamat. By this we understand that at a cataclysmic event in a pre-literary period, reddish rains fell from the sky just as they did in 1902.
41-story stone structure of laser precision tolerances scientifically measured to contain a coding based of rectilinear distances of units all divisible by 138. A holospheric template of the future built over 48 centuries ago. The Great Pyramid of Giza is a crystalline geopolymer resonance generator carrying out a 138-year cataclysm protocol.
In verse 6 we read that Methuselah and his brethren, all the sons of Enoch, made haste and erected an altar at the place called Achuzan, where Enoch had been taken up into heaven. In my very first published book, The Lost Scriptures of Giza, is definitively shown that the place called Achuzan was later known as Giza, that it was regarded as an altar of God in the land of Egypt. In that day there shall be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border. Border means Giza, Giza means border, thereof to the Lord. And it shall be for a sign and for a witness unto the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt. This is the altar of Adam. This is also the pillar of Enoch. They are one in the same. And the geometrical value for this passage is 5448, which just happens to be exactly the height of the Great Pyramid today, minus the chief cornerstone, 5,448 inches. The reason this is relevant is because the intended geometrical height of the Great Pyramid, if it had its capstone, would be 5,814 inches, which is 366 inches higher than it is today. Why is this relevant? Because Enoch was said to have written 366 books. But this is a code. Also, as seen, it is believed that Nostradamus named the Phoenix and associated it with the year 1903, and 1902 was the last time Phoenix had visited, although many strange phenomena occurred in 1903 as well. It is also known that the coat of arms for the family of Nostradamus was a shield with two solar symbols and the head of a phoenix. Though Nostradamus was no doubt heavily influenced by his Judeo-Christian Catholic background, these are not enough to explain his prophetic precision. He was a self-proclaimed descendant of the Israelite tribe of Issachar, and interestingly, if this was true or not, the biblical record states that the men of Issachar were keepers of the times.
You make the decision for yourself. As regarding the person and identity of Jesus, apparently in history there was a very unique figure. He did rock the boat, so to speak. He was profound in every sense of the word. We don't know if Jesus was a fiction later basically affixed to a person named Apollonius of Samaria, because their lives are parallel without the dressing. But the very earliest Christian records make no mention of anything supernatural, no healings. There is no sun hitting, no earthquake. There is no virgin birth. There is none of the miraculous things that you find in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are found in the very oldest Christian records. They are quite normal as a human who had some divine foresight, a teacher of righteousness, somebody who was not from Judea, had come in and introduced foreign elements that were profound, and the Jews hated him. Who he was, we don't know. But the evidence can suggest both. That he was a normal man who was divinely touched, or he was the divine pretending to be a normal man. You make the decision for yourself. We have evidence of both.
In May 2040, we'll be back to horse and buggy. We are stuck in a loop. We have been where we are today many times before, on the precipice of a cataclysm. For centuries, we depended on draft animals for living and building. 1804 begins a rapid advancements in technology. In 1804, steam-powered locomotive. In 1825, the Erie Canal. 1874, electricity. 1885, skyscraper. 1892, motion picture. 1903, manned flight. 1906, the wireless radio. 1945, the atomic test. 1947, the transistor which made computers possible. 1990, the World Wide Web. 2004, personal cell phones were ubiquitous. From horseback to Hadron Collider is only 200 years.
Then the Ogygian flood in 1687 BC, which put a stop to the old world. Technologies were now completely gone. Technolithic period, the pre-Technolithic advanced civilization was gone. Then the Technolithic period, which survived with some of their technologies. Then the post-Technolithic period, which is the shock and awe period when the gods disappeared and the Great Flood occurred. Then the Heliolithic period, which was after the flood, the vapor canopy collapsed. Now the sun appeared, and now it's called the Heliolithic period. And all the rulers of all the dynasties of the Heliolithic period called themselves children of the sun. Now, those dynasties, the children of the sun dynasties, all collapsed in 1687 BC. And a man almost 100 years ago named W.J. Perry, a scholar, he wrote a 551-page book. I read it. It was fascinating. And it's all about the single year in history, 1688 BC, when all the dynasties of the children of the sun vanished in cataclysms.
In fact, just prior to every phoenix destruction, there appears a very strange red star in the sky. The next variable star cataclysm to occur is May 2040. And in the Andromeda constellation, above Pisces, the end is a binary system, 36 Andromedae. One star orbits another at 165-year cycles, with its last periastrion being 1957 AD. This means, observable from Earth, the maximum separation between these stars will be in 2040 AD. It enters the biblical narrative of the 10 plagues on Egypt. But it wasn't just Egypt, it was all around the Mediterranean world. And 138 years later, it comes back again. And we have reference after reference after reference of this object. And it's always 138 years, which is really unusual, because that's 1,556 months. Just like 1,556 years of the pre-flood world.